Last time I covered a real piece of shit, so this time I think I'm well within my rights to review a good book for a change. If you liked Robert Heinlein's Starship Troopers, Joe Haldeman's The Forever War, or John Steakley's Armor, then this book should be right up your alley. But even if you don't like military science fiction, or science fiction in general, I still think this book is well worth your time. The story is about John Perry, an old man who recently lost his wife to a stroke. On his 75th birthday, he goes to visit her grave, and after that, he joins the army. Now you're probably wondering, how the hell can a 75-year-old man join the army, much less fight aliens? Even though the idea sounds ridiculous at first, it's a very good hook, and I challenge anyone not to read past the first page. Oh, and by the way, I'm not giving you any big spoilers. You learn in the opening lines that he's lost his wife and he's joining the army. Speaking of spoilers, I don't want to tell you exactly how they turn John Perry into a combat-ready soldier when he's 75. In fact, I think the less you know about the book going in, the more you'll enjoy it. But I can say that Scalzi takes the traditional cliches of the war novel and spins most of them completely on their head. The story's plot is very well written and has John Perry fighting a number of alien species across the universe. I found no plot holes, and the story is not predictable, unlike some war novels. There is one plot twist, though, I did find a little hard to swallow. It involves the introduction of a new character in the third part of the story. Now, it's not completely unbelievable, and Scalzi does set it up if you go back and look at the beginning of the book. But the appearance of this character was a little too quick, I thought. It was like the character just showed up out of nowhere and it's like, where did this person come from? Also, I felt that the third part was a little bit weaker than the other two parts in terms of plot. Instead of subverting the typical war novel, the third part kind of read like a science fiction version of the Guns of Navarone. That's not to say that it was terrible. It was still very good and had some great action scenes in it. However, it just didn't quite get me as excited as the other two parts, and the plot was a little bit weaker, I felt. One area where Scalzi really shines is in his characterization. He does a great job delineating the characters and making them seem like real people and not like stereotypical grunts that you find in most war novels. In other words, they're not just cannon fodder. Over the course of the story, you come to care about John Perry and the other characters, and you hope that they'll make it through alright. To me, that's the mark of a really good novel. Furthermore, I commend Scalzi for subverting the typical genre stereotypes of the war novel. For example, we've all seen the stereotypical drill instructor who shouts profanities at the new recruits, but here Scalzi changes the cliché and you learn why the drill sergeant is screaming at these people. He's not just a lovable lunkhead or some hard-ass getting on their case for no reason. Scalzi makes him into a living, breathing character. Another great part about this novel is the humor. There are some scenes in this novel that are laugh-out-loud funny. For example, the Brain Pal naming scene. I don't want to ruin it for you guys, but trust me, you will be laughing your ass off when you read this part. Occasionally there were too many jokes in the book that I felt undercut the drama of the story, and John Perry's first-person narration was a bit too snarky for my tastes. But at least John Scalzi resisted the temptation of putting in a bunch of bad puns, unlike, say, David Brin's Killing People. In addition to terrific plotting and characterization, Scalzi does a really good job with the prose. It's simply written, but it's not so simple that it's been dumbed down. Nor is it overly complex or full of flowery prose that makes you want to stab your eyeballs out with an ice pick. Compare Scalzi's writing to any number of the fuckwits who are dominating the bestseller list these days. I'm talking about assholes like Stephanie Meyer and Christopher Paolini, who couldn't fucking write if their lives depended on it. Compare them to Scalzi, and you'll see that Scalzi clearly comes out on top. I also like the fact that Scalzi has some very interesting ideas about man and his place in the universe. But unlike, say, Robert Heinlein's Starship Troopers, he didn't pound those fucking ideas into your head until your brains were bloody. Don't get me wrong, I do think that Heinlein was a very good writer, but unfortunately sometimes his didacticism got in the way of telling a good story. However, in Scalzi's case, he merely presents his ideas and allows you to accept them or not as you please, and I appreciate that a lot as a reader. Another aspect of the novel that I liked was the fact that Perry fought multiple alien races instead of one. In many science fiction novels and movies, the characters fight only one type of alien. In Starship Troopers it was the bugs, in The Forever War it was the Taurans, in Armor it was the ants, in Ender's Game it was the buggers, and in Aliens it was the xenomorphs. But in this universe there's a multitude of different alien races, each with their own motivation for fighting. And not all of them are looking to eat and kill humans, although some of them are. I really appreciated Scalzi's diverse cast of aliens, in particular the Kansu. Again, I don't want to give away any spoilers, but I commend Scalzi for creating such a unique and interesting alien race. I also want to give him major kudos for some of his science fiction inventions, including the Brain Pal, the MP-35 infantry rifle, and the skip drive. About the only other negative thing I can say for the book is that I didn't think it was quite as good as Joe Haldeman's The Forever War. In my not-so-humble opinion, I think The Forever War is the best military science fiction novel ever written, and Old Man's War, though terrific, pales in comparison. However, despite my preference for Haldeman's book, don't pass this novel up because it's superb. In fact, one thing that surprises me is that Hollywood hasn't picked this book up already. Because in the right hands, and by right hands I mean not Uwe Boll's hands, not Joel Schumacher's hands, and certainly not fucking George Lucas's hands, this novel could make a terrific film. Instead of remaking Total Recall or RoboCop or Dune, maybe Hollywood should try this one for a change. Or maybe they should come up with some fucking original ideas instead. How about that? But that's another rant for another day. Actually, now that I think about it, maybe it's just as well they don't turn this book into a movie, especially when you consider how many good science fiction novels Hollywood's fucked up. And with any luck, John Scalzi won't suffer the indignity of having his novel bastardized into some fucked up film starring Shia LaDouf and Paris Hilton. So in conclusion, I think this book is a must-read. Go to Borders, go to Amazon.com, hell, if you can't afford the book, go to your local library and check it out, because I really think it's worth your time.